Greetings to all of you, my dear students. Today we are going to discuss something about mechanism of drug action and receptors. So because this is a very vast topic, so I have divided it into two sessions. So we'll go through that. First session, now we will deal with it. So mechanism of drug action principles and then drug receptors. So I'm going to cover the first session under the following subheadings, that is the pharmacodynamics, sites of drug action, principles of drug action, receptors, all basics, and then pharmacodynamic principles. So before getting into the discussion, I have few questions to all of you. Why do some drugs produce effects that persist for minutes, hours, or even days after the drug is no longer present? Then why do responses to other drugs diminish rapidly with prolonged or repeated administration? How do cellular mechanisms for amplifying external chemical signals explain the phenomenon of spare receptors? And then why do chemically similar drugs often exhibit extraordinary selectivity in their actions? So few drugs have only selective action. And do these mechanisms provide targets for developing new drugs? So to get answers to these questions, we need to go through the first and second session of this receptors topic. Let us see. Pharmacodynamics. What is it? A drug reaching the site of action in the body produces pharmacological effects. And these effects, pharmacological effects, can be either desirable or undesirable or toxic. The site of drug action and the mechanism of drug action are the two fundamental principles in pharmacodynamics. So suppose you are giving a drug, so it may produce desirable or undesirable, even toxic effects. Pharmacodynamics deals with the biological and therapeutic effects of drugs. So what is the definition of pharmacodynamics? It is the study of drug effects elucidating the complete action effect sequence and the dose effect relationship. Okay, drug effects producing action effect sequence and dose effect relationship. What is it? Action and effect. Both are sounding similar. So is there any difference between those two terms? Let us see. Effect. Effect means it is the response produced by a drug which can be measured and quantified. How much effect a particular drug molecule is producing, that is effect. So we can see that, we can quantify that. Then action. How and where the effect is produced is called action. The action can be identified. So action can be seen where exactly the action is produced. It can be identified. For example, adrenaline molecule is there. If you administer to a patient, so the patient, we can see the increase in heart rate, that is the effect that is produced. And the action is because of stimulation of alpha-1 receptors. So increasing heart rate, how much? That is the quantity that we can elicit. And we can notify the stimulation of alpha-1 receptors, that is action. So action is drug to cell interaction. So it is going to combine with alpha-1 receptors, that is the interaction. Then while effect is the subsequent event after action. First action is produced, then effect is followed. Then why do we need to learn something about pharmacodynamics? Understanding pharmacodynamics is essential as it provides the basis not only for rational selection of drugs, but also for their judicious use to produce the maximum benefit with minimum risk. So which molecule has to be selected and how to use, how best we have to use regarding the pharmacokinetics, dynamics, every principle will be involved in this to particular selection of a drug molecule and judicious use of it based on the pharmacodynamic principles. Okay. Then coming to the sites of drug action. So it can be divided into various categories. So number one, that is local action. Action at the site where drug is administered. So example is glucocorticoid ointment for skin lesions at the site of action. Skin lesion is we are having, and then we are applying the drug at the same site. Counter irritants such as methyl salicylate, then gastric antacids. Then systemic action. Action after absorption into the systemic circulation. So it can be either cellular, intracellular, or even extracellular. What is cellular action? Let us see. Effect of adrenaline on heart and blood vessels. Action of acetylcholine on nicotinic receptors of motor and brain. And inhibition of enzyme, that is sodium potassium ATPase enzyme by digoxin. So this action occurs at the cellular level, at cell. Then intracellular within the cell and outside the cell, that is extracellular. Intracellular means rifampicin inhibiting the synthesis of nucleic acid, that is within the cell. Trimethoprim interfering with the synthesis of folic acid, an intracellular component. Then extracellular. Antacids neutralizing gastric acid, that happens within the lumen of the stomach. And chelating agents forming complexes with heavy metals, that is also same. And then magnesium sulfate acting as osmotic purgative by retaining the fluid inside the lumen of the intestine and increasing fecal bulk. So it is happening within the lumen, so it is extracellular action. Then another principle is two drugs may exhibit the same effect, but their site of action may differ. So these points are all they are all important for VIVA-OC. Pilocarpine and morphine producing meiosis. Site of action of pilocarpine is circular medulla phyris, whereas morphine is third cranial nerve nucleus. But both the drug molecule produce the same effect, that is meiosis. Then principles of drug action. Drugs do not produce a new action. Rather, they alter, that is either facilitate or inhibit or replace the existing action. So one is replacing the existing action and another is facilitating or depressing the existing action. So the drug can produce only a quantitative response, how much kind of thing, and not a qualitative change in the function of the target organ. So we'll see various types of actions that the drug molecules produce. Number one is stimulation. Increase in the activity of a physiological system or particular tissue or cells. Example, adrenaline stimulating the heart. So it produces like increase in heart rate and force of contraction. Then pilocarpine stimulates salivary glands. It is a kind of stimulatory action. Then excessive stimulation followed by depression. It is not like that stimulation will continue forever for certain molecules. It will be followed by depression in certain molecules. So high dose of picrotoxin, a CNS stimulant, produces convulsions followed by coma and respiratory depression. So CNS stimulation followed by CNS depression. Then a drug may specifically stimulate certain portions of a particular system but depress the others. Example, morphine stimulates the vagus, the oculomotor nuclei, and the CTZ. All these will be stimulated, whereas it depresses the respiratory center and the cough center. So one area stimulation, one area depression. Acetylcholine stimulates intestinal smooth muscle but depresses SA node in the heart. Then depression, pure depression. Decrease in activity of a physiological system or particular tissue or cells. Example, quinidine depresses the heart, barbiturates depress the CNS, omeprazole decreases gastric acid secretion. Then replacement of endogenous substances. So use of natural metabolites or hormones or their congeners in case of deficiency states. Insulin is substituted in a patient suffering from diabetes mellitus because that patient is deficient of insulin. Similarly, thyroxine in hypothyroidism, hydrocortisone in Addison's disease, levodopa in Parkinsonism, and iron in simple anemia. Then alteration of immune status, either immunostimulation or suppression. Suppression is being done with corticosteroids and immunostimulation most commonly with levamisole. And even vaccines and anti-sera are also used for immunostimulation. Vaccines like polio vaccine and anti-sera like anti-sera for diphtheria. Antimicrobial action. Drugs are used for prevention, arrest, and eradication of infections acting specifically on the causative organs. That is antibiotics. Then cytotoxic action. Selective cytotoxic action on invading parasites or cancer cells, attenuating them without significantly affecting the host cells, is utilized for cure or palliation of infections and neoplasms. Palliative therapy means the disease may not be cured, but we can give the patient a quality improved quality of life. That is palliative therapy. So here cytotoxic action means it will be acting on either parasites or the cancer cells, but not affecting the host cells. That is cytotoxic action. We need to be like selected. Penicillin, chloroquine, and cyclophosphamide come under this group. Then by altering neurotransmission, antidepressants block the reuptake of neurotransmitters, that is noradrenaline and 5-hydroxytryptamine. Then irritation. It's a non-specific phenomenon which occurs in any living tissue. Irritation means that a drug produces adverse effects on the growth, nutrition, and morphology of living tissues. It produces changes in the cellular structure and can produce inflammation, corrosion, and necrosis of cells. So it's like some kind of irritation, changing the growth and nutrition and morphology of living cells. Sometimes even it can lead up to the stage of inflammation, corrosion, and necrosis. Generally, heavy metals like mercury and silver produce such kind of reactions. And mild irritation, it can be beneficial and will have therapeutic utility. Senna and cascara. So this is like senna, which is obtained or extracted from the leaves and fruits of the plant. And this is cascara obtained from the bark of the plant. So they both have stimulating effect on the mucosal cells of the gut, and they act as laxatives. This is mild irritation which is being utilized for the therapeutic application. And the cellular changes produced are astringent effect, that is precipitation of proteins, which can be up to certain effect beneficial. Like girls will be using astringent lotions like cosmetic lotions to clean the pores and then clean the oily face, oily skin, everything. So that is like a kind of beneficial effect, astringent effect. Alcohol precipitates the proteins by astringent action. This particular precipitation of the proteins is used in case of patients who are bedridden. So they will be more prone for boils on the skin because the skin will become very thin, and then it will be more prone for boils because of the constant bedridden nature. So in that case, if we use the astringents, they can like precipitate the proteins and harden the skin, so which will be having beneficial effect. Then harmful. The irritant may dissolve the precipitated proteins, resulting in deeper penetration of the irritant, causing more extensive tissue damage. So that was the superficial action. It is the deep action. So deep penetration of the irritant can give rise to the more extensive tissue damage, which is otherwise known as corrosive effect. So you can see here, it is most commonly seen with strong acids and alkalis. Then dehydration, so water going out of the body. Then cytotoxic action, damage to the cell wall or muscle, cell wall or nucleus. So example is anti-cancer drugs. When an irritant agent is applied locally to the skin to relieve deep-seated pain, it is referred to as counter-irritant. So here, irritant agent we are using for therapeutic application when the patient is already having deep-seated pain. So you must be seeing our grandmothers and grandfathers applying oils on the skin, especially on like knee joints or any other injured areas. So the counter irritant is applied to the skin situated over the organ responsible for pain, like volatile oils like turpentine oil. And here you are seeing this methyl salicylate or wintergreen oil, which is extracted from the leaves of the plant. And capsaicin, that is extracted from red chili peppers, or they are also applied locally to relieve deep pain. What is the mechanism of action? Counter irritant, when there is already some deep burning pain is there, we are giving the irritant which is going to act as a counter irritant. So main mechanism of action here is the sensory impulses emanating from the skin because of the deep-seated organ damage. So that may interfere with the transmission of pain impulses coming from the viscera and may even produce their partial or complete explosion by occupying the final common sensory pathway. So one pain is getting originated through the deep-seated viscera, from the deep-seated viscera. And another pain because of the irritant that we are using, we are applying on the skin. So both these pains compete with each other. So the pain that which we produce by using irritant on the local application, that is from the skin, predominates the pain that is originating from the deep organs. So because of which there is a gating theory, the complete exclusion of the deep-seated pain will be there, because those pain receptors will be occupied by this pain pathway. So the vasodilatation and blockade of pain impulses may explain the relief of deep-seated pain here. Then pharmacodynamic principles. What are receptors? Let us see. In a broad sense, all types of target molecules, including the effectors, enzymes, channels, transporters, etc., with which a drug can bind to produce its action, have been denoted as receptors by some authors. So it is like effectors, enzymes, channels, transporters with which a drug can go and combine with it. So if that is the case, then xanthine oxidase is an enzyme, would be the receptor for allopurinol drug molecule, because that molecule is going to act upon xanthine oxidase. So we can't call it as a receptor. Similar is the case with L-type calcium channels, would be the receptor for nifedipine. So the largest number of drugs do not bind directly to the effectors, that is enzymes, channels, transporters, structural proteins, template biomolecules, etc. But they act through specific regulatory macromolecules which control the above listed effectors. So the drug is not going to directly combine with the effectors. In between, there is a regulatory molecule that is known as receptor. So these regulatory macromolecules are the sites on them which associate with and interact with the drug are called as receptors. Hope you got it. So receptor is defined as a macromolecule or binding site located on the surface of the cell or inside the effector cell that serves to recognize the signal molecule or drug and initiate the response to it, but itself has no other function. It is a macromolecule. So it will be having a binding site towards the drug molecule will combine and then initiate the response. So that is receptor. Usually the receptors will not have any function. Why I am using this word usually, that you will find out in the subsequent slides. Receptor is the component of a cell or organism that interacts with the drug and initiates the chain of events leading to the drug substance effect. So we will get the pharmacological action finally because of the receptor mediated actions. And these are the macromolecules, mostly proteins, but nucleic acids also serve as receptors. And hundreds of receptor proteins have been isolated, purified, cloned, and their primary amino acid sequence has been worked out by molecular cloning methods, identification of receptors. Then evidence of receptors. How come they could know that a kind of structure, that is macromolecule, regulatory protein is present, which is known as a receptor in the body? Let us see. Many drugs exhibit structural specificity of action, that is, specific chemical configuration is associated with a particular action. So a drug molecule has particular chemical structure, which is going to produce particular pharmacological effect. So here, a 3-carbon internitrogen separation in the side chain of phenothiazines results in anti-dopaminergic, antipsychotic compounds. Whereas 2-carbon separation produces anticholinergic, antihistaminic compounds. So just by changing the chemical structure of a molecule, the pharmacodynamic actions are getting affected. It is going to produce different, it is going to give different pharmacodynamic actions. Chiral drugs also show stereospecificity in action, that is levonoradrenaline is 10 times more potent than dextronoradrenaline. Thus, the cell must have some mechanism to recognize a particular chemical configuration and 3-dimensional structure. So then they thought, the scientists have thought that there must be some reason, some regulatory molecule must be present, which is giving rise to, when we change the chemical structure, that is going to give rise to different effect of that particular drug. Okay. Then competitive antagonism is seen between specific agonists and antagonists. So that is another point to think about. There is an evidence of receptors. Then Langley in 1878 was so impressed by the mutual antagonism among two alkaloids like pilocarpine and atropine. So they both produce the same kind of effect. Not same kind of effect, but they both combine with the same kind of receptor substance, which is called as a receptor. Then Ehrlich in 1900 observed quantitative neutralization between toxins and antitoxins and designated receptor to be the anchoring group of the protoplasmic molecule for the administered compound. So when toxins are liberated in the body and when we administer antitoxins or antidotes, they are going to combine with each other and nullify the action of the toxins. So this is another area where they have thought that a receptor kind of structure must be there, through which both of them are going to get combined and then acting. It was later calculated by Clark that adrenaline and acetylcholine produce their maximal effect on frog's heart by occupying only 1 by 6,000th of the cardiac cell surface. The special regions of reactivity to such drugs must be present on the cells. What is this? Only occupying the cardiac cell surface, only that much minimal portion is occupied by that particular drug molecule, whether it is acetylcholine or adrenaline, and they are producing the effect. So there must be something is there which is giving rise to the effect. So all these areas of evidence, they made the scientists discover the receptors, the macromolecules, which are regulatory in action. Then Langley in 1878 propounded a theory that drug or ligand, when it combines with the receptor, it produces the effect. So drug molecule, this one, combining with ligand binding domain of the receptor, producing drug receptor complex, which is producing the ultimate effect of the particular drug. So receptor concept later was given by John Langley, and word receptor was coined by Paul Ehrlich, who gave the definition in the early days of receptor, that of combining group of the protoplasmic molecule to which the introduced group is anchored. Then later on, this definition is little bit modified by seeing the actions of various drugs. So that is a specific macromolecular protein, membrane bound, or even that may be present whether it in the cell membrane or in the intracellular also, which is capable of binding with specific functional groups of the drug or endogenous drugs. So drugs also can combine, and even endogenous substances also can combine with this macromolecular proteinaceous structures. Those are referred to as receptors. So receptor is a purely regulative macromolecule which combines with and mediates the actions of signal molecules, any signal molecule, whether it is endogenous or even drug, including drug. So why I am repeating the same sentence and again with slight modification is one keyword I am inserting. So you will come to know the meaning of that particular, the signal molecules. It could be either drugs or endogenous compounds. Most drugs must bind to a receptor to bring about an effect. Okay. Most drugs means there is a non-receptor mediated action also that we'll see at the end of the section. Then binding of a drug with its receptor results in the formation of drug receptor complex. So drug binding with receptor giving rise to drug receptor complex, which is responsible for triggering the biological response. So inhibition of metabolism of endogenous activator, that means when metabolism is decreased, we have discussed this point in biotransformation lecture, increased activator action on the effector molecule, so increased effect can be seen. Some receptors incorporate effector machinery in the same molecule, so the drug binding brings about the effect directly. So we have seen that the drug molecule has to combine with a ligand binding site of the receptor molecule, and then it has to go and stimulate the effector, and then it has to produce the pharmacological response. So here some drugs, what do? They incorporate effector molecule also within the receptor molecule. So in such a kind of situation, the receptor and effector combination will be there. So the drug will go and combine directly with that combined molecule where receptor is clinging to effector molecule. So then drug receptor effector complex is formed, which is going to produce the effect. Example is opening of an ion channel or activation of enzyme activity. whereas other receptors are linked through one or more intervening coupling molecules to a separate effector molecule. So they don't have effector molecule which is embedded within the receptor. So this drug receptor complex has to activate the coupling molecule, which is going to initiate the effector molecule to produce the biological or pharmacological response. So you can see here, stimulus or drug combining with the receptor, motivating the effector, giving rise to receptor response. So here in certain cases, effector is combined with that of the receptor, giving rise to direct effect. Cells have many different types of receptors, each of which are specific for a particular agonist and produce a unique response. That means cardiac cell membrane contains beta-adrenergic receptors that bind and respond to epinephrine. So epinephrine or norepinephrine will combine with cardiac cell membrane beta receptors. And also muscarinic receptors also are present in the cardiac cell membrane that will get bound to acetylcholine and give a pharmacological response. The magnitude of the cellular response is proportional to the number of drug receptor complexes. How many complexes is formed? So that gives rise to the magnitude of the cellular response. Then receptor binding, reversible binding. With the formation of hydrogen bonds or van der Waals bonds or electrostatic bonds, this is like it will happen with reversible binding. That is, majority of the drugs follow this path. Then comes irreversible binding. Certain molecules irreversibly bind, that is like through covalent bond. Example is organophosphorus insecticides binding to acetylcholine esterase through covalent bond. And there is another binding that is known as stereoselective binding. If the drug has optical isomers, then either levo form or dextro form, one will be active. Examples are levoepinephrine, levomorphine, or dextroamphetamine. Then what is ligand? Let us see. Ligand. In Latin, ligare means to bind. So it is a molecule that combines specifically to a particular receptor. So ligand can be either agonist or antagonist. We'll see the terminology agonist and antagonist later. The term only indicates affinity or ability to bind without regarding to the functional change. That is, agonists and competitive antagonists are both ligands of the same receptors. For example, agonists can initiate a response, whereas antagonists, they don't produce any response. So affinity means that is the ability of the receptor to drug molecule or ligand molecule to combine with the receptor. Intrinsic activity means to produce the pharmacological response. Okay. So here it doesn't matter whether it is an agonist or antagonist, anything can become a ligand and then can bind with the receptor. So here you can see ligand or drug molecule combining with the receptor. There's a signal perception, then intracellular signal transduction will be there, giving rise to cellular response. The receptor occupation theory by Clark. Interaction, so we are going to discuss many theories are there, around 6 to 7 theories are there. I'm going to discuss only few theories here. Interaction between two molecular species, that is drug and receptor, to be governed by the law of mass action, and the effect to be a direct function of the drug receptor complex form. So how much ever the drug receptor or complexes are formed, that much we will get the effect. Subsequently, it was realized that occupation of the receptor is essential, but not itself sufficient to elicit a response. The agonist must be able to activate or even induce a conformational change in the receptor. So that is another point. So this is like pharmacological effect of the drug depends on the percentage of the receptors occupied. That was given by occupation theory by Clark. Then Arians and Stephenson, he has propounded another theory where he stated that effectiveness of a drug lasts as long as the receptor is occupied. As long as. And Pedon's hypothesis is effectiveness of a drug does not depend on the actual occupation of the receptor, but by obtaining proper stimulus. Something has to initiate the chain of events there. Okay. So duration of receptor occupation determines if a drug is agonist antagonist or partial antagonist here. And apart from that, stimulus also needs to be present there. So here, as long as the receptor is occupied, so long we will be getting the effect. And here, it does not depend on the actual occupation of the receptor. That is not sufficient. After occupation, some stimulus must be there to result in cascade of events. So receptor occupation theory. Structure of a receptor resembles the three-dimensional configuration of the drug in the same way as the levers of a lock or the three-dimensional mirror image of the grooves of the key with which it opens. So we will be discussing in detail about the receptor occupation theory. We don't want other theories now. So this theory can be easily explained by if you take like a drug molecule, comparing it with that of the lock and then key, how it is going to get opened. And then the receptor, drug receptor can be combined and compared like that. So affinity, ability of a drug to bind to its receptor and form the complex with its receptor or drug receptor complex. So you can see it like in this picture, key is entering into the hole of the lock. So ability of a drug to bind its receptor. Just drug is going and then combining with the receptor. That's it. It is in the initial state. That is called as affinity of that particular drug. Higher the affinity implies that the same number of drug receptor molecules will be formed at lower concentrations of the drug compared to another drug which has lower affinity. Affinity means like it is the ability to combine with the receptor. So more affinity means it is like more ability to combine with the receptor. Then intrinsic activity or efficacy. The ability of a drug to induce a functional change in the receptor and trigger the pharmacological response after making the drug receptor complex. Drug is bound to the receptor, that is affinity is there. After that, it is going to induce a function, a pharmacological, induce a functional change in the receptor, which gives rise to the pharmacological response. So that is known as intrinsic activity or efficacy. So it varies from 0 to -1. It is denoted like that. So it is like key after entering into the keyhole of the lock opens the lock. That is intrinsic activity. After binding, structural or functional change of the receptor will be there, giving rise to the pharmacological response. Then we'll see agonist, partial agonist, antagonist, inverse agonist, all these things in connection to this occupation theory. Drugs which can trigger maximum biological response or mimic the response of endogenous substance after combining with the receptor. That is the same site or other allostatic site. Okay, endogenous substances are there in the body. Drug molecules we are exogenously administering. If a drug molecule produces same kind of responses that are similar to that of the physiological responses that a particular endogenous substance is producing, then it is like similar to that of that particular drug and it can be called as agonist. So they both have high affinity and high intrinsic. They have high affinity and high intrinsic activity. So that can be intrinsic activity can be denoted by 1. So example is methacholine is a cholinergic drug agonist which mimics the effects of acetylcholine on cholinergic receptors. So cholinergic receptors are there in the body. Acetylcholine is endogenously released. Methacholine, which is a cholinergic drug, it mimics the actions of acetylcholine, which is an endogenous molecule. So that methacholine is administered, which produces the actions which are similar to that of endogenous molecule, that is acetylcholine, that is called as agonist. And salbutamol is beta-2 receptor agonist. And agonists that inhibit their binding molecules. Some drugs mimic agonist drugs by inhibiting the molecules responsible for terminating the action of an endogenous agonist. It is like one way in mimicking the actions of endogenous agonist. Another way by inhibiting the termination or metabolism of the endogenous agonist. So if the metabolism of the endogenous agonist is inhibited, so endogenous agonistic action will be elicited. So both are same. It is direct and it is indirect. So example, acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Acetylcholine will be inhibited or metabolized or destroyed by cholinesterase. So that is inherent within the body. That is physiological phenomenon. Here we are using acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. So by slowing, so these molecules, they minimize or slow the destruction of endogenous acetylcholine, thus cause cholinomimetic effects that closely resemble the actions of cholinesterase agonist molecules. Even though cholinesterase inhibitors do not bind or only incidentally bind to cholinesterase. So these drug molecules, which are inhibitors, they're not going to bind with the receptors, but still they will mimic the actions of the agonist. So that is what is known as agonists that inhibit their binding molecules producing agonistic action. Because they amplify the effects of physiologically released agonist ligands, their effects are sometimes more selective and less toxic. So this principle is used for therapeutic application. Got it? Then antagonists. Drugs which can bind to the receptor, compete with, and prevent the action of an agonist on a receptor and its subsequent response, but do not have any effect of its own. Please remember, don't get confused here. Antagonist molecule will go and combine with receptor molecule, and it will not, when it combines with the receptor molecule, it will not allow the agonist molecule to combine with the same receptor. So it is blocking the action of the agonist, but it will not produce its own actions. Antagonist does not produce any of its own action. Okay. So antagonists have only affinity but no intrinsic activity. Intrinsic activity is zero for antagonists. They are not going to produce any efficacy or intrinsic activity. So example is atropine blocks the effects of acetylcholine on the cholinergic muscarinic receptor. So when you give atropine, atropine as such will not produce any effects. But atropine will block the effects of acetylcholine that is endogenously released and acting on the cholinergic muscarinic receptors. That is why it is known as atropine is antagonistic to acetylcholine. Then atropine is acetylcholine receptor antagonist because it prevents the access of acetylcholine and similar kind of agonist drugs which produce acetylcholine-like action to the acetylcholine receptor site, and they stabilize the receptor in its inactive state. We'll see what is the inactive state of the receptor and active state of the receptor by going through a receptor model. These agents, that is antagonists, reduce the effects of acetylcholine and similar molecules in the body, but their action can be overcome by increasing the dose of the agonist. So antagonist has bound to receptor, blocking the actions or even blocking the binding of agonist to the receptor, and thus blocking the actions of agonists. But this can be overcome by increasing the dose of the agonist. Then it will go on combine with the receptor and then produce its action. But some antagonists bind very tightly to the receptor molecule in an irreversible or pseudo-irreversible fashion and cannot be displaced by increasing the agonist concentration. So to get the agonist activity, we are going to increase the dose of the agonist molecule so that the agonist molecule will be replacing the antagonist molecule, because at high dose it has the ability to replace the antagonist molecule. But if the agonist molecule is combining with the receptor with a covalent bond in an irreversible manner, tight junction, so then the agonist, how much ever concentration you use, it will not have any ability to replace the or displace the antagonist. Then allosteric antagonism. An allosteric antagonist binds to a site. Allosteric means a different site other than the agonist binding site and prevents receptor activation by the agonist. So till now we have discussed about the agonist and antagonist competing with the same receptor binding site. So here allosteric antagonism means the receptor site of the antagonist may be differing and receptor site of the agonist may be differing. But even though antagonist attaches to the receptor at a different site than that of the agonist, it has still a capability to prevent the receptor activation by the agonist, that is allosteric antagonist. Example, when picrotoxin or agonist binds inside of the GABA control chloride channel, so that is the ion channel, that is a kind of receptor, GABA receptors, which has chloride ion channel. No chloride can pass through the channel even when GABA fully occupies the receptor. GABA may occupy as an agonist, but when picrotoxin molecule, GABA is an antagonist. So like picrotoxin agonist binds inside the GABA control chloride channel. So it will block the effect. Okay, no chlorides can pass through. Then partial agonists. Drugs which activate a receptor to produce submaximal effect. Drugs which activate a receptor to produce some submaximal effect. Agonist will be producing some heightened response, and partial agonist will not be producing that much heightened response, but a little less than that. So they have full affinity to the receptor, but a low intrinsic activity. So they are referred as partial agonists, which are partially as effective as agonists. Example, pentajocin, a narcotic analgesic, is a partial agonist at mu subtype of opioid receptor. Such drugs display an intermediate effectiveness between agonist and antagonist. And agonist is producing full response, antagonist as such by itself no response. In between there lies a state, the molecule is acting as partial agonist between that of the agonist and antagonist. Partial agonists also antagonize the effects of a full agonist because they occupy a large population of the receptors. So they can antagonize the effects of a full agonist. Large number of receptors are occupied. We have seen the other theories. While producing small response and leave fewer receptors to interact with the full agonist. Example, buprenorphine precipitates withdrawal symptoms in a highly morphine dependent subject but can substitute for it at lower levels of morphine dependence. Morphine dependent subject is there. So he has been taking like morphine chronically for a long period of time for since several months. So morphine is there within the body. So here a partial agonist of morphine, that is buprenorphine, can be given to that particular patient. So even though the heightened response that is produced by partial agonist is little less when compared to the agonist, because it occupies a larger proportions of the receptors, so morphine will be displaced because of the occupancy of buprenorphine by majority of the number of the receptors. So it can result in morphine withdrawal symptoms in that particular patient. But in the absence of full agonist, they produce some agonistic action, but they do not produce maximum response even at higher concentration. Partial agonist, if the full agonist is not there, they can produce some agonistic action. But if you go on increasing the dose of the partial agonist, they can't produce an action much higher than that of the agonist, that is partial agonist. The lower ceiling response to a partial agonist, that is lower height of contraction, what for example we can say, is not because of lower affinity for the receptors. Affinity is same for the both agonist and partial agonist. In fact, some partial agonists have higher affinity and are dose to dose more potent than full agonists. So the drug molecule has that much effect only. It is not nowhere related to the affinity. Example, buprenorphine is 25 times more potent than morphine, which is full agonist of mu opioid receptor, but is a partial agonist, which is partial agonist. Buprenorphine is more potent than morphine, which is a full agonist. But buprenorphine is a partial agonist and cannot relieve very severe pain or deeply depress the respiration. Because intrinsic activity is not that much when compared to the agonist regarding this partial agonist. So we can't expect much of analgesic action and much of respiratory depressing property with partial agonist buprenorphine. So you can see here, agonist, drug molecule combined with a receptor and activating them, and antagonist, drugs occupy the receptors but no action. Antagonist, This molecule goes and combines with the receptor. So blockade of the receptor binding site by the agonist molecule. So less activation. Only few receptors will be left over. Mixed agonist antagonism. In the case of opioids, which act on several types of receptors, some act as agonists or partial agonists on one type of receptor, but as antagonists on another type of receptors. Some agonistic action, some antagonistic action. It is a mixed action. Example, pentagocin and nalbuphine act as agonists on kappa receptors, but as antagonists on mu receptors, which is known as mixed agonism and antagonism. Inverse agonism. Drugs which inactivate constitutively active receptors. So we'll discuss about this constitutive action of the receptors in the subsequent slides. Just try to remember constitutive action of the receptors. They can be inactivated, partial, that means constitutive active state means partially active even in the basal state, that is in the complete absence of any agonism. That means in one sentence, I'll just tell you here itself, like a receptor is there, agonist is not there, but receptor is going to get activated itself and then producing its own action. That is what is known as constitutive active nature of the receptors. So inverse agonists inhibit that kind of constitutive nature of the receptors also, and thus prevent their basal activity, producing an effect opposite to agonist even in its absence. So even though agonist is not there, inverse agonist may produce an antagonistic or reversal action of that of the agonist. So the full affinity they will have, but the intrinsic activity is 0 to -1. So that is like inverse activity. Example, beta corbolins act as inverse agonists at benzodiazepine receptor and thus produce effects like anxiety, insomnia, and seizures, which are opposite of the therapeutic effects of benzodiazepines. So benzodiazepines are used in the management of anxiety, insomnia, and seizures. But whereas beta corbolins, when we administer, they act as inverse agonists at benzyne receptors and they produce all these manifestations. So inverse actions. A competitive antagonist has no effect in the absence of agonist, whereas inverse agonist shows opposite effects by deactivating the receptor even in the absence of agonist. So if you give competitive antagonist by itself, when there is no agonist in the body, competitive antagonist will not produce any effect. Whereas inverse agonist, if you administer, even if there is no agonist, it will produce actions similar to that of opposite actions of agonist. That is the difference between competitive agonist and inverse antagonist and inverse agonist. Then agonist drugs which has act as agonist at some receptor and antagonist, that is like pentagocin. We have discussed, I think, this one. Antagonist at mu opioid receptor and agonist at kappa opioid receptor. Then two-state receptor model. We were discussing about the nature of the receptors, active state and inactive state. That can be clearly explained through this two-state receptor model. And after understanding the nature, the state of the receptor, then we can understand it in a better way regarding the agonist, antagonist, partial agonist, and inverse agonist. So this two-state receptor model is an attractive model for explaining the action of agonist, antagonist, partial agonist, and inverse agonist. So here the receptor exists in two interchangeable states. It can exist in this state or that state. That is like one is active, one is inactive. Any of the state the receptor may exist, which are in equilibrium with one another. So generally, in the inactive state, both the active and inactive states will be in equilibrium with one another. And in case of majority of receptors, inactive state is favored at equilibrium. So that means no signal or very weak signal is generated in the absence of the agonist. So that means the receptor exhibits no constitutive action. Usually this happens. The receptor will not produce any active. It will not get activated to produce its own response. Sometimes the receptor gets stimulated by itself without the presence of the agonist, so then that is known as constitutive activation of that particular receptor. So here you can see resting equilibrium, activated state, inactive state. I means inactive, A means active. So agonist A molecule is given. So it is going to favor the activated state. So it will combine with this, producing the response. Antagonist favoring the inactivated state of the receptor. So combine with the inactivated state, producing no response. And it can like favor both the things equally, activated state and inactivated state. So there is equilibrium is going to happen. So it is stabilized, so there is no response. Then partial agonist producing little response because more favor with active state when compared to the inactive state. So it is going to produce partial response. Whereas inverse agonist more favor with inactive state producing opposite response. Antagonist both the states, inverse agonist with the inactive state producing opposite response. So constitutive activity we have already discussed, I think. Thermodynamic considerations indicate that even in the absence of any agonist, some of the receptor pool must exist in the activated form some of the time and may produce the same physiological effect as agonist-induced activity. This effect in the absence of agonist is known as constitutive activity. Then agonist. As per the two-state receptor model, agonist binds preferentially to the activated conformation and shifts the equilibrium to the activated state. That's what we have seen in the diagram. And response is generated depending on the concentration of the agonist. When the drug has very high affinity for the active conformation than the inactive, such a drug will be an agonist. And it will shift the equilibrium towards the active state and activates the receptor. Whereas competitive antagonist binds to both active and inactive states with equal affinity. So the equilibrium is stabilized, which is not altered. So no response is generated. And when the agonist is applied, fewer activated receptors are available to bind it. Response to agonist is decreased. Only few receptors are available because competitive antagonist is blocking the active state of the receptor. Okay, because of that, less response of the agonist may be happen and majority of the times no response only. Partial agonist. If an agonist has only slightly greater affinity for activated state when compared to the inactive state, the equilibrium is only modestly shifted towards activated state and to a lesser extent than full agonist, even at very high concentrations. So submaximal response will be seen no matter how much ever the higher concentration of partial agonist that you administer. So they do not stabilize the RA and RA states. Even like they do not stabilize even the RA configuration, RA state like that of the full agonist, so that a significant fraction of receptors exist in the RA state. Little bit portion will be in the inactive form, but more of active form. Such drugs are said to have low intrinsic efficacy. Because they occupy the receptors, partial agonists can also prevent access by full agonists. It's a very, very, very important point. So here Pindalol, a beta adrenoceptor partial agonist, may act as an agonist if no agonist is present. And if you administer agonist like epinephrine, then it may act as antagonist. How come? This Pindalol, which is acting as an agonist, it is going to occupy majority of the receptors of beta adrenoceptors. Beta adrenoceptors are occupied majority by Pindalol molecule. If you have a full agonist that is epinephrine, then only very few receptors, beta adrenoceptors are left over, which can combine with epinephrine and produce little less action or even antagonizing action. Okay, so they prevent, it is not exactly antagonism, they prevent access by full agonist. So you can see the heightened response with full agonist molecule and then partial agonistic molecule. This is less response. Then inverse agonist has high affinity for the inactive state of the receptor. So it can produce an opposite response provided the resting equilibrium was in favor of the activated state. So example, GABA A receptor effector. So this GABA A receptor is combined with the effector, that is an ion channel, that is a chloride channel in the nervous system. So this receptor, GABA A receptor, is activated by the endogenous transmitter GABA, that is the inhibitory neurotransmitter. which causes inhibition of postsynaptic cells. So conventional exogenous agonists such as benzodiazepines also facilitate the receptor effector system and cause GABA-like inhibition that of like sedation as the therapeutic results. So GABA, endogenous neurotransmitter, it will combine with GABA A receptors, which is combined with the effector molecule that is chloride ion channel and produce sedation. And exogenous agonists, similarly, if you give benzodiazepine, it also will combine with the same receptor producing sedation. This sedation can be reversed by conventional neutral antagonists such as flumazenil, that is benzodiazepine receptor antagonist. Then, inverse agonists of this receptor system cause anxiety and agitation, the inverse of sedation, etc. So, inverse agonist means exactly opposite effects of that of agonist. So, beta carbolines. So, here they act as like inverse agonist to the agonist molecules. So similarly, we can see the inverse agonist for beta adrenoceptors, histaminergic H1 and H2 receptors, and several other receptor mechanisms also. You can see here, this is antagonist no response, partial little response, full agonist heightened response, inverse agonist negative response. That is why intrinsic activity is 0 to -1. Here you can say antagonist no response because it is equipoised to both active and inactive state. Full agonist towards it is shifted towards the activated state of the receptor, and the inverse agonist towards the inactive state. So again, antagonist, agonist, and then inverse agonist, the negative response. Then coming to the duration of drug action. If you give a particular drug, it is not going to act forever, producing pharmacological response forever throughout your life. So how long it has to act? So termination of drug action can result from several processes. In some cases, the effect lasts only as long as the drug occupies the receptor. And dissociation of the drug from the receptor automatically terminates the effect. That is one method, one modality of termination of drug action. But in many cases, the action may persist after the drug has dissociated from the receptor also, because the coupling molecule is still present in the activated state. That is why even after dissociation from the receptor, it is going to produce its action. In case of drugs that bind covalently to the receptor site, the effect may persist until the drug receptor complex is destroyed, because it is covalent bond, strong bond, irreversible bond, which is not going to be broken by any means between the receptor and the drug molecule. So until you break that bond, or until that particular enzyme which is destroyed is again resynthesized, you can't terminate the action. Example is aspirin. So here the aspirin has irreversible action on cyclooxygenase enzyme. So until a fresh new cyclooxygenase enzyme is synthesized, you can't terminate the action. In addition, many receptor effector systems incorporate desensitization mechanisms. So one is like drug receptor moving away, the complex drug molecule going away from the receptor, but still coupling molecule, if it is in active state, so it is going to produce duration of action, produce its own action. Another is until the drug receptor complex is destroyed or the new enzyme is synthesized. Then another is desensitization mechanisms for preventing excessive activation when agonist molecules continue to be present for long periods. It's like physiological milieu. So if one thing is too much, so automatically, inherently within the body biological system, that activity will be brought down. That is desensitization mechanism. Then receptors and inert binding sites. They are also referred to as silent receptors, but the terminology is removed because they are not acting like a receptors. So the proper term that can be used here is inert binding site. So the binding of the drug to some chemical component of the cell does not lead to any pharmacological effect. So generally, chemical component of the cell means receptor. So drug is going to combine with the receptor producing some pharmacological effect. Here, one chemical component of the cell which combines with the drug molecule but no response, then it is known as acceptor site or non-specific binding site or inert binding site. For example, plasma proteins like albumin and albumin acid glycoprotein. So drug molecules will combine with them also. Plasma protein binding is there within the body, but there is no pharmacological response. So that is why plasma proteins are referred to as inert binding sites. But what is the use of this then? Such binding is not completely without significance because it affects the distribution of drug within the body, which is again dependent on the free form on combined form and determines the amount of free drug in the circulation. So both of these factors are of pharmacokinetic importance. Okay. Then orphan receptors and orphan drugs. Orphan receptors means drug receptors for which there are no endogenous physiological ligands. So they don't have any ligands. Example, benzodiazepine receptor, sulfonylurea receptor, intracellular receptor for retinoic acid. They may prove to be targets for novel drugs yet to be developed. They may be. And then orphan drugs and treatment of rare diseases, same is the case. Drugs for rare diseases are known as orphan drugs, can be difficult to research, develop, and market. Then spare or reserve receptors. It's a very, very, very important concept in the drug development, even the pharmacodynamic actions, and especially for postgraduate students. When drugs act on receptors to produce the response, all the receptors are not occupied to produce the maximal response by a full agonist. Each cell or tissue has some receptors unoccupied, which may be called spare receptors. For example, 99% of the receptors are occupied by a particular drug. 1% is left over, which is not going to be occupied. So no pharmacological response through those 1% of receptors. Those 1% receptors which are unoccupied are known as spare receptors or reserve receptors. They will come into action when needed. Even 1% receptor occupancy can produce the maximal response by a full agonist. For example, if 99% is the receptor reserve, so even 1% can produce a maximum response by full agonist sometimes. And maximum response may not be produced even when 100% receptors are occupied by partial agonist. Got the concept? So 1% receptor occupancy also can give heightened response, and 100% receptor occupancy may not give heightened response. So that means there is a possibility of spare receptors. So in myocardium, maximum response due to catecholamines can be produced even when 10% receptors are occupied. So here the spare receptors are 90%. So high number of spare receptors are there for that particular, what can I say, tissue. So if receptor reserve is high, it indicates that the tissue sensitivity is high. So myocardium, there is a specific tissue. So only 10% receptors are occupied, but very good amount of pharmacological response we are getting. So the receptor reserve is high. That means 90% is the receptor reserve. So the tissue sensitivity is very high. Even with 10% involvement, it is going to give very good response. So experimental demonstration of spare receptors is very, very important for postgraduate students. Spare receptors may be demonstrated by using irreversible antagonists to prevent binding of agonists to a proportion of available receptors and showing that high concentration of agonists can still produce an undiminished maximal response. So here irreversible antagonist is used to prevent binding of the agonist to a proportion of available receptors. For example, some amount of receptors are occupied by irreversible antagonists. And then high concentration of agonist, if you increase the dose, then again you can produce maximal response. Example here, the same maximal inotropic response of the heart muscle to catecholamines can be elicited even when 90% of beta adrenoceptors to which they bind are occupied by quasi-irreversible antagonists. So 90% of the receptors here, beta adrenoceptors, are occupied irreversible antagonists. Still, if you give agonist, it is producing very heightened, good amount of heightened response. That means some amount of receptors are there apart from this 90%. So that is 10%, which are going to give the heightened response or good amount of response. which are known as pair receptors. That is the experimental demonstration. Then another terminology, drug potency. It is a quantitative parameter. It is the amount of drug, how much you are going to give, required to produce a response. When two drugs have similar effect, then the drug that produces a similar response in lower dose. Suppose one drug is like, here itself the example is that anti-inflammatory dose of pyroxicam is 20 milligrams. That of diclofenac sodium is 200 milligrams. So anti-inflammatory effect will be exhibited by 20 milligrams of pyroxicam and 200 milligrams of diclofenac sodium. So with the lower dose, it is going to give equal response when compared to the molecule with the higher dose. So pyroxicam is more potent when compared to diclofenac sodium here. So you can see here, high potency. Small dose giving rise to the same heightened response. Low potency, larger dose giving rise to the same heightened response. Then drug efficacy. Efficacy is a qualitative parameter. The maximum response achieved by a drug when it interacts with the receptor is called its efficacy or quality of the response. Efficacy is dependent on the number of drug receptor complexes. So there is a maximum response. How much heightened? That was like the quantity of the dose. Drug potency means. So it is dependent on the number of drug receptor complexes formed, and this can be compared by plotting the log dose of the two drugs. Intrinsic activity log dose of the dose response curve of two or more drugs is shown by maximum height of the dose response curve of the drug. So here example is the diuretic action is high with loop diuretics, that is like furosemide, and low with potassium sparing diuretics, that is spironolactone. Heightened response. When you plot the log dose response curve, then one is going to show the heightened response and another is not going to show the heightened response. So that's how you can differentiate the which is more efficacious when compared to the other drug. So efficacy is more important than the potency. If a drug is more efficacious, it is better than a drug which is more potent. You can see heightened response means highly efficacious, lower response is low efficacious. Same dose we are using here. Then receptor selectivity. Selectivity of binding of drugs to receptors depends on their physicochemical structure. If a drug produces any of the above action only at one receptor, it is called a selective agonist or antagonist. So salbutamol is beta-2 receptor selective agonist. It acts only on beta-2 receptors. Whereas isoprenaline is non-selective agonist at beta receptors because it acts both beta-1 receptors and beta-2 receptors. So non-selective agonist at beta receptors. Atenolol is beta-1 receptor selective antagonist, whereas propranolol is non-selective antagonist because it blocks both beta-1 and beta-2 receptors. Then absolute selectivity. Salbutamol will not stimulate alpha receptors even at high dose. So absolute selectivity of salbutamol is only for beta receptors. Relative selectivity. Salbutamol is selective beta-2 receptor agonist in therapeutic doses, but if you go on increasing the dose of that particular molecule, it can also stimulate beta-1 receptors at high doses. So that is known as relative selectivity. Whereas absolute selectivity, how much ever you increase the dose, the selectivity will not be lost even at high dose. Then super sensitivity. If the muscle tissue is denervated, or if a receptor is blocked by an antagonist for long period of time. So negative response. That means no response, I can say. New receptors are synthesized. It is like a physiological internal milieu, balance, equilibrium. So if the response is going down, so new receptors are synthesized to produce the response. So these new receptors proliferate on cell or membrane and show exaggerated response to very small amount of neurotransmitter, which is known as supersensitivity. Example, tardive dyskinesia is due to supersensitivity of dopaminergic receptors as a result of prolonged blockade of dopaminergic receptors by neuroleptics, which are dopamine antagonists. So it most commonly happens with the drug administration that is like blocked by antagonists for prolonged period. Desensitization. The receptor-mediated response to drugs and hormones after reaching initial high level So response is going high, high, high. So it has to be come down because of the for the reason of physiological balance. So it gradually reduces within seconds to minutes, even in the presence of agonist, which is called as desensitization. It is a reversible process. A neuromuscular junction desensitization is caused by a slow conformational change in the receptor, resulting in the tight binding of the agonist molecule without opening the ion channel. Tight binding, because of which desensitization happens. And beta adrenoceptors, G protein coupled receptors, and desensitization become unable to activate adenylate cyclase even after binding to the agonist molecule. And it is one of the modality of receptor action termination. Okay. Then homologous desensitization and heterologous. Response is reduced only to stimulated response and is due to alteration in the receptors, that is homologous. Heterologous means response is reduced to all receptors that share a common signaling pathway and is due to loss of one or more proteins that participate in signal due to stimulation of other receptors. So, how many ever number of receptors which share the common signaling pathway, all these things we'll discuss in the second session. So please make a note that until and unless you understand the first session, you can't understand the second session. And so many of the basics I have discussed here, and some connection is there between first and two. So all those receptors which share a common signaling pathway, everything will be desensitized. That is heterologous desensitization. So desensitization, so high response is reached, then it happens desensitization within seconds or minutes. Reversible process, even in the presence of agonist, it happens. And exaggerated response, then prolonged block by an antagonist, then fast upregulation of the receptors, then new receptors are highly sensitive, then tardive dyskinesia. So this response, this is like antagonist, chronic administration, no response, so upregulation of receptors giving rise to super sensitivity. Then refractory receptors. Some receptors, particularly ion channels, require a finite time following stimulation before they can be activated again. It's like lag period. So during this recovery phase, unresponsive receptors are called as refractory receptors. Then downregulation. Prolonged exposure to high concentration of agonist leads to reduction in the number of receptors. So there is a difference between downregulation and desensitization. Downregulation means decreased number of receptors. Desensitization means decreased heightened response of the drug. Okay. So high concentration of agonist. So number of receptors will reduce. So that is downregulation. It is because of internalization or endocytosis of the receptor from cell surface, which is due to phosphorylation that renders receptors unresponsive to the agonist. So, severe asthmatics no longer respond to beta adrenoceptor agonists because they have been like on administration of that particular agonist molecule. So, the patient will exhibit the process of down regulation of the receptors. Then upregulation. Prolonged blockade of the receptor by antagonists, same thing, leads to increased number of receptors with increased receptor sensitivity, which is known as down regulation of receptors. It is due to externalization of the receptors outside from inside of the cell surface. Okay, they are more active, more number. Such receptors become accessible to the endogenous agonist. When the antagonist is stopped suddenly, the stimulation of increased number of receptors causes exaggerated response. That is because of like a, we can say, we can see in the patients like a withdrawal phenomenon. That's what we discussed in the other way also in the earlier slides. Upregulation of beta 1 receptors of cardiac tissue due to thyroid hormone, which increase cardiac sensitivity to catecholamines, leading to tachycardia. That is one example. And chronic administration of beta blocker propranolol is accompanied by increasing in the number of beta adrenergic receptors. That is upregulation. Suppose suddenly if you withdraw the antagonist, that is beta blocker, there is sudden withdrawal in the patient's with ischemic heart disease makes him more susceptible to the effects of endogenous noradrenaline because of the upregulation of the receptors, and this may precipitate anginal attacks in such patients. So you need to be very careful whenever you are dealing with the drug administration, how long you have to give, And if the patient has come to you after a long period of drug administration, which drug you are going to produce, and what are the basics of principles of drug action are happening. So how much dose you have to give, when to taper, when to administer, everything you need to keep an eye on it. Then down regulation, up regulation, prolonged use of agonists. This is because of prolonged use of antagonists. So decrease receptor number and sensitivity, increase in number and sensitivity. So decrease drug effect, increase drug effect. So with the down regulation and desensitization, there is decreased response, and up regulation and supersensitivity, there is increased response. Then what is the clinical significance of this? Reduced effect of drugs. Prolonged use of beta 2 agonists in a patient of bronchial asthma leads to diminished response due to down regulation of receptors. That's what we have discussed. Only thing is that this is the clinical application that we are going to use in the management of bronchial asthma. Atrial fibrillation in hyperthyroidism occurs due to upregulation of beta 1 receptors caused by excess of thyroid hormones in hyperthyroidism. Prolonged use of tricyclic antidepressants leads to downregulation of beta receptors, prolonged downregulation. Okay. Then with associated with upregulation of alpha receptors, and reverse effect is observed in case of endogenous depression. Then sudden withdrawal of clonidine, that is alpha 2 receptor agonist in hypertension patient. Response is enhanced due to sudden release of catecholamines, which is due to down regulation of alpha 2 receptor. Suppose the patient has been taking clonidine, that is alpha 2 receptor agonist, for a long period of time. You have withdrawn the patient from that drug molecule. Okay, so what happens? The down regulation or up regulation, you have to just think about it. The number of central alpha 2 receptors is too small for endogenous agonist noradrenaline to produce their effective stimulation. This results in sudden rise of BP due to stimulation of peripheral vascular alpha 1 receptors and cardiac beta receptors. That is, altogether, chronic administration, you are going to withdraw. So what chronic administration of any agonist produces down regulation. Suddenly, if you withdraw the molecule, then flare up of the reactions will happen. Receptors and diseases. Myasthenia gravis, that is due to formation of autoantibodies against nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. Hyperthyroidism is due to autoantibodies mimicking the effect of agonist and activating thyrotropin receptors, resulting into hypersecretion of thyroid hormones. And similarly, insulin-resistant type 1 diabetes mellitus, antibodies against insulin receptors, testicular feminization syndrome due to deficiency of androgen receptors, either receptor deficiency or overproduction, that is what, or antibody protection, that will be the reason. Familial hypercholesterolemia due to decrease in LDL receptors. Then functions of receptors. Number one is, you can yourself tell now after hearing to the entire discussion. Number one is to propagate regulatory signals from outside to inside the effector cell when the molecular species carrying the signal cannot itself penetrate the cell membrane. So it takes the help of the receptor and enters into the cell, carries the signaling pathway, signal transduction happens to the cell to produce the effects within the cell. To amplify the signal, amplification. Then to integrate various extracellular and intracellular regulatory signals, integration between both the two. To adapt to short-term and long-term changes in the regulatory milieu and maintain homeostasis. This will be dealt with in the later central nervous system topics. Then that's all. Here we end the topic. So hope you have understood the topic. Without going through the first session, don't go through the second session. So it is very tough to understand the second session if you don't understand the basics of receptors. So if you have any questions, you can come on to my personal window and clarify your doubts. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.